Hi there, I'm Anna Seisling, host of Great Lakes Now. I'm so grateful to you for joining us today. And joining me in conversation is Cameo George, who is the executive producer of American Experience. They have a new documentary coming out called Poisoned Ground, The Tragedy at Love Canal. And we're going to talk with Cameo a little bit about what went into making that project and what was learned along the way. Cameo, thanks so much for joining me.
So happy to be here with you.
Absolutely. So, Love Canal, there are so many, I think, different and important climate stories to tell. Some of them are really uplifting, some of them not so much. What was interesting, though, I think, about this documentary, from my view, is that although parts of it were heartbreaking, it is a really powerful story. For people who aren't familiar with Love Canal, this is really the first chemical disaster that unfolded in front of America's eyes. I wonder, Cameo, as you were starting out this project, what was your personal level of familiarity with Love Canal?
Well, I have to say, I am born and raised in New York. I grew up here, but in the city. And I think Love Canal was it's one of those names that you're familiar with. You know that it represents something awful. You know that it's related to chemicals, toxic waste, but I don't know that I knew all of the ins and the outs of the story that certainly I learned along the way of this production. So it's really, I think I knew the headlines of Love Canal, that it was something awful, something bad, and it led to Superfund, and that's probably it. I don't think I knew anything else, to be honest.
Wow, I bet you learned a lot along the way. Speaking of things that I wonder if you learned along the way, just the role of women and the role that concerned housewives and mothers who were residents of the Love Canal area played in galvanizing this movement was so evident to me throughout watching this documentary. And I wonder at what point it became clear to you, okay, these women, these need to be the central figures in this story that we're telling.
These women had to be the central figures of the story from day one. As soon as we started doing research, as soon as we started looking into how the world became familiar with Love Canal, how change was affected in Love Canal, it was clear that you could not tell the story without telling the story of the women, the housewives, the mothers, the self described ordinary housewives who absolutely kept this story front and center in the media, in front of local officials. They are the ones who we have to thank for knowing what Love Canal is, knowing what your rights are if you live, unfortunately, on or near a Superfund site. This story, none of us would know what Love Canal was without these women. They are truly heroic in every sense of the word.
100%. And, as we try within Great Lakes Now to think about and cover environmental justice issues and to think about that intersection between climate, health, social justice, I really couldn't help but just look at these women in this documentary and think, wow, this is like really feels like I am witnessing the birth of the environmental justice movement in a way that was really powerful.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I really appreciated something that you said right at the beginning, that while this story is tragic and it's painful and emotional, it is also empowering and, in a weird way, exciting, because you see these regular people doing these extraordinary things. They do research, they canvass their neighborhood. Like I said, they go in front of government officials and they change the way that we think about how we as citizens interact with our built environment. But they also, as I said, they're really inspiring because they took it in their own hands and they took it upon themselves to create change, to protect themselves, their families, their children, their community. And it is truly a story of how a regular person can be a catalyst for incredible change.
Absolutely. And as the story is unfolding in Poison Ground, the tragedy at Love Canal, there are plants not growing. There are animals dying. And the residents, many of whom are still alive today, recount that this just seemed normal because it's what was happening to other people in the community. And to that end, although the Love Canal disaster and everything that has unfolded in the decades since then, it certainly has that particular area in a different spot than it was in back then. There are still, so many different environmental disasters and legacy contaminants and pollution plaguing and negatively impacting communities all throughout the country. So I wonder if you can speak to that piece of it a little bit about, Love Canal was back then, but there's a whole lot still happening right now, including, contaminants that back in the Love Canal 70s days, folks didn't even know existed and are a real concern right now. So I wonder if you can sort of speak to, a little bit of where we're at present day now.
Yeah, it's the amazing but also really sad thing about this film that it is a historical documentary about events that happened, 40 plus years ago, but it is as relevant as ever. Just as we are unveiling this film and starting to do preview screenings, we were in Buffalo and the Niagara Falls Love Canal area just this week. We're learning that studies have come studies have come to light that forever chemicals are in our water supply across the US. We are seeing that in East Palestine, Ohio, there's just recently a settlement for the people of that community whose water and ground and air were contaminated after a horrific train derailment. So these issues, they are not in the past. And one of the things that really surprised me, quite frankly, was that there are people, young families with children, who live in Love Canal right now, right in the area that we explored in this film. And I have to say, like, that shocked me. I thought that this would be an area that would be off limits forever, that people would be so familiar with what happens there that that no one would want to live there. But there are homes and backyards and playgrounds right there. And so another thing that we came to understand through the making of this film is that millions of Americans live within a mile of a Superfund site right now. And so it's not, we think about these areas and these names that we know, Love Canal, East Palestine, we think of Flint, Michigan with their contaminated water. But even if your community is not in the headlines, like, you could be way closer to a Superfund site than you think. And I'm not saying that to scare people, to frighten people, although it is a little bit frightening, but just to say that we have to be empowered with information. And I think that one of the things that really came from the making of this film for us was that we truly got an education into how to do research, how to find out what the air quality is like in your community, again, how close you are to a site. There are just a lot of things that we sort of take for granted and don't take the time to research.
Mm, yeah. And, to that point, I wanted to ask you sort of, what you hope that audiences walk away with, either knowing or thinking about when it comes to that really important piece of getting curious and investigating about, what is the safety and current state of your neighborhood as it relates to, contaminants and all of these other environmental toxins that can impact our health. How would you recommend that people maybe start following the breadcrumbs and trying to figure out, what is playing out in their own neighborhoods?
Mhm. I think it really is about information. So even just something as simple as Googling your address and the word Superfund to see there are maps that have been created not just by the government, but by other media organizations as well, where you can find out what the, again, air, water, ground quality is in your neighborhood. So I think that that's an easy way to start, just by doing an internet search. But I think that the other thing that I really hope that people take away from this film is that if you think that something is wrong and you're seeing curious and strange things, look into it. Follow the lead, follow your gut. One of the saddest parts of this story is that these incredible women, mothers, they were told that they were crazy and they were ignored by scientists. Scientists said, you're high school graduates, you have no advanced degrees. Like, why should we listen to you? Why should we take you seriously? And I think that just getting over that hump was incredible. And scientists at one point, when these incredible women were collecting data showing high rates of miscarriage, liver disease, epilepsy, seizure disorders, asthma, all of these things that were happening within their community, the scientific community dismissed it as, quote, useless housewife data. And these women were like, we are not useless. Like, we know what's happening, and we just have to get to a point where people are listening and they're taking us seriously. So I really think that that idea of, again, being an advocate for yourself and knowing that you're not crazy and that you have the power and the tools to do research. You do not have to be a molecular biologist or an climate scientist and expert to know that you're experiencing something that's off. And so it's really just about taking back the power and recognizing that you have a role to play in not just your own life and in your home, but in the safety of your community.
Definitely. Cameo, thank you so much for that. And I think, to that point, something that I sort of walked away with, I think, was a feeling of both the importance of persistence and also the really clear notion that we are not going to make change alone, that we need
Yes.
community and we need to, if there is something that becomes identified that needs to be fixed or addressed, to find like-minded people and to come together around that and to not give up. I don't have any more questions for you, but before we wrap up, I wonder if there are any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to leave our viewers with.
Again, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for allowing us to talk about this incredible film. Parting words: just be vigilant, be aware, pay attention, and speak up. Speak up for yourself. I think that's the lesson that we can all take. And as you said, you don't have to do it alone. The power of community is incredible.
Hmm. Executive producer of American Experience and their new documentary, Poison Ground: The Tragedy at Love Canal, Cameo George. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.